It is.
All right, great. So good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the September 21st HHS meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Okay, Chair Renahan,
Here.
Member Schwarzy,
Here.
Member Selman,
Here.
Member Chaplin,
Here.
Member Desart,
Here.
Member LaPlante.
Here. Great, thank you. Thank you all. Do we have any public comments?
No public comment.
All right. As far as my comments, I'd like to thank Vice Chair Schwarzy for doing an amazing job last week, our last meeting for the HHS, so I appreciate that. And many of you I know have had questions about the eviction process. We know the moratorium will soon be coming to an end, and I think we're all concerned about how landlords and tenants and how residents are going to experience this. So our community services is working well with the court services, trying to make this process as friendly as possible through outreach. As we know, an eviction manager is going to be part of the team, and to better advise us as to exactly what is going on in terms of the dovetailing and the handshake from government to the public. I'd like to have Mary Keating and Joan Fox provide us more information.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to give the sort of overview. If any questions get super technical, that's absolutely Joan's expertise and 100% not mine. Before I talk about eviction, I just want to give a quick update on what I think is really good news with the IDA rent assistance program. Because obviously, the more people we can assist with rent assistance, we try and everything we're doing in terms of evictions is trying to solve the problem as far upstream as we can. So as of the 16th, which was last Thursday, IDA had approved 1,687 applications for rent assistance from DuPage tenants, averaging $9,400. So that's a total of about $15.8 million. And they're still working through. There's about 250 applications that are still in review. That's on the applications that were initiated by the landlords. There's a separate pot of applications that were initiated by tenants, and they're getting to those. They're just starting to go through those. So
I'm sorry, how many are still?
there's 250 still in review of the landlord initiated. I apologize, I didn't write down the number of tenants.
Mary, is that information yet public, or when it is public, maybe can you give us a share of some sort?
Sure. I can forward you I have it all by individual county, and they do an update every couple of days. They create a spreadsheet. So yes, I'm happy to send it to you. Anecdotally, last time we met with the judges who sit in eviction court, they did indicate, and this was about 3 weeks ago, they talked about that they were starting to see cases be dismissed or resolved, I guess, because the rent assistance money had come through. So hopefully that's sort of step one on eviction diversion, is don't even have the eviction filed in the first place or have it easily dismissed. So in terms of eviction diversion, we're a little bit flying the plane while we're building it. The state has actually initiated a court-based rental assistance program. It's really just a continuation of the IDA program. It's a different portal that's only where it's the same portal, but you can only get access to it if you actually have a summons number, so that you have to have an eviction case that's pending. I'll also point out Kimberly Barrist, who spoke at JPS this morning, and Alyssa Fortino, both used to work in the Department of Community Services. So apparently we're a good training ground for people to move over to the courts. So what that means, though, is that particularly in Alyssa's case, because she did housing assistance in Joan's unit, she's extremely familiar with everything that we do, and so we're very excited about that very warm handoff that there will be between what they do and what we do. So as I said, the state launched their program last Thursday. The way it works is that anyone who has an eviction case pending can go to the IDA portal, answer a series of questions which include information about summons, and then IDA is actually processing those applications. It's kind of complicated. The Illinois Department of Human Services actually oversees the program and the eligibility. IDA is the one who's actually reviewing the applications for approval. all tenants who are being served a summons will get a notice of, are they getting that? Is that still in draft form?
I think it's still in draft.
It's still in draft form. They will be getting information with their summons. It's like page 2 of the summons that includes information about Prairie State Legal, information about mediation services, and information about the court-based rental assistance program. So that's the first step, is when they're served the summons, they'll get the information. The second way that that will be, if folks, don't look at that information, don't apply. We're coordinating with the court system so that we have a case manager sort of in training right now, trying to figure out exactly how to get inserted into this process, where she'll sit, all that kind of work. But we will have case managers there over at the courts or available via Zoom, so that the judge or the mediators or the mediation coordinator can make sure that the tenant and landlord are both very familiar with the ability to continue to apply for rental assistance. That rental assistance program, they're committing to turning that around once there's a completed application within a matter of, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a week, as quickly as possible. What our hope is that the very first time the tenant landlord appear before the judge will say, did you apply for rent assistance? And if they did not, or if it's pending, they'll do a continuation, and hopefully within that period of time, both the tenant and landlord can upload their information and get a pretty quick turnaround. So our goal, as I said, is to try and get information as upstream as possible, so as early as possible in the process. We've had some discussions with the clerk's office about how we can pull the tenant's information off of the summons. It's kind of a complicated process because it's a PDF. There's not, and even the filing is done by an attorney, so we don't necessarily, there's not a quick and easy way to get information on the tenant and landlord. So we will do the best we can, but we know that we'll be able to grab them when they're at their first court appearance. We had a call Friday afternoon with the staff from IDA, who are actually in charge of processing these applications. They have a dedicated staff just working on the court-based system. Julio could not have been more helpful and accommodating, and really excited about having county staff sort of be their boots on the ground to make sure, because they want completed applications. It makes their job easier. They want to get this money out the door. So he gave us, his direct email, direct phone to the people who will be coordinating this. Really what we want the ability to do is be able to communicate back to the courts when necessary. So if there was something coming up in front of the judge and the judge said, these folks were supposed to apply 3 weeks ago, can you tell me? So we can just call IDA and ask if an application has been submitted, if it's complete. So we're very excited about having the ability to communicate back to the courts. Just something else, Prairie State Legal is currently on they do a Facebook Live event every Thursday at noon, giving folks the latest on the moratorium, eviction process. So if you have individuals who are interested, I'd recommend Prairie State every Thursday at noon. That's kind of where we are. I talked with Suzanne and Kimberly and Alyssa after JPS this morning. We're going to hopefully get a meeting set up yet again this week, just sort of internally to figure out the process, and then get back to the judges on what exactly we want our process to be. Joan had a call with the state yesterday to answer a number of questions about eligibility and process. And so, as Joan just said, she's feeling a lot better about this process than she was a week ago today. There's been a lot of great information we've learned really since Thursday. So that's where we are. We're excited to move forward with it. And that's it.
Member Jeff?
Thank you. Thanks, Mary. Thanks for the great update. So, excuse me. So my question is, you mentioned that the judge, one of the first things they might ask is if they've applied for rental assistance, and then, if they haven't. So if the judge does ask, if they have applied for rental assistance, and let's say they haven't, would they go to a mediator then, or would there be somebody there to, because maybe some people don't know about the rental assistance programs.
Right.
And then I'm also wondering, one thing I'm sure it wasn't talked about in JPS, but there will be like interpreters available for this program, because I'm wondering if, some of the people that might need assistance may have a language barrier and may not even really understand that well.
Right.
So
Right.
those are some things I was wondering.
Yeah, so a couple things. I think the goal is if it's a case that can be solved 100% just with payment of back rent, there really would be no need to go to mediation.
Okay.
We want again, this upstream concept, if they don't need to go to mediation because rent assistance, it's just a matter of, hey, the landlord says, if I get my $8,000, we're good, or
Okay.
whatever it is. But the mediators would be another way to catch if somebody still hasn't applied. So
Okay.
that's what we need to work out with the staff from the courts, is exactly where we sort of plug into the process. I said, it's like trying to figure out how to jump in double dutch. There's like all these moving parts, and we're trying to
Okay. Great.
figure out where to jump. And in terms of language barriers, we love it when we find bilingual candidates, and certainly would love to find a bilingual candidate. If we don't, we have access to phone interpreters. We use them all the time.
Okay.
And then I think the courts, in the actual courtroom, if I'm not mistaken, the courts do provide interpreters. But in terms of sort of the case management piece, we would either, like I said, we prefer to have bilingual staff if we can find them, and if not, we use tele-interpreters.
Great. Thank you so much.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? Yeah, I would say, thank you for all your work. You guys have been so proactive and, working with our court staff. I think there's been a very thoughtful dive into what this is going to look like, although like you said, it's very much a work in progress. So,
Well, I have to give all that credit to Joan. She is diving into this head first, and really is trying to figure out, she sat in on eviction court, on Zoom court for probably a couple of months on and off, just really trying to understand the process. What are the barriers that the tenants bring? How does the process work? What's the timing? So she's done a huge amount of work on this. So I get to stand up here and talk about the work we are doing, but Joan's actually doing it all. So
now we know your secret.
yeah, that's right.
It is a team effort for sure. Joan, do you have anything that you want to add, or?
We're just really excited to get this started. We don't know what kind of volume we're going to get when October 4th hits, but we're already seeing that kind of increase in the courts. So we're excited to work with the state program. It looks like they have a great portal, a great system that's easy to understand for the tenants who need to apply. We're so happy that we have the courts backing and that coordination to help us get as far upstream as possible in the process, do outreach wherever we need. And we're looking forward to it. It's a good opportunity. It's a lot of work. Our team will do a lot of work, but it's a great opportunity to help our residents.
Yeah, I think the forward thinking being done here is, something to be very proud of, DuPage County. So thank you. Just for anybody who wasn't at JPS, so the governor's moratorium does end October 3rd. So October 4th is kind of the day. So, and I'm just going to say for the record, I did not have double Dutch on my bingo card for today. I don't know if anyone else did. But thank you for that.
I was never able to do it. So. I did a lot of the rocking back and forth, trying to figure out what the time. I could never get the timing right.
So I'll take a motion to approve the HHS minutes of September 7th,
Second.
2021. Second, who's the second? We have.
Remember to start.
Thank you. Questions, comments, additions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those pass. We have two travel authorizations. The first is, I'll take a motion for the community services manager to go to, let's say, Springfield for regional OBSBUD quarterly program, October 20th to the 21st. $340.
Second.
Questions, comments, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's approved. We have a second authorization. I'll take a motion on community services manager to go to the annual strategic meeting for Serve Illinois Commission, October 4th through the 5th. Notes from DuPage County,
Second.
Oglesby, Illinois. All right. Questions, comments, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, I'll take a motion on grant proposal notification GPN 58-21 Home Investment Partnership Program, ARPA, $6,505,249 for home services. Questions or comments? Gary, do you want to?
I'll just point out that this is another one of the allocations that comes in that 93 million total. This is for the creation or rehabilitation of affordable housing, rental affordable housing. There is a new category with this fund that you can use it to purchase or construct non-congregate shelters. So HUD just released the final rule, or maybe the interim rule about how to use these funds last week. It's like, 103 pages of federal regulations, but so we're kind of sorting through that. This will come through decisions through the Community Development Commission first, how we determine to spend this money. There is a 10-year spending horizon on this, so we've got some time to think about what's the most strategic way to invest these funds. It's about 4 times what we typically get. So we get a home allocation every year. This is about 4 times our regular allocation.
Thank you, Mary. Any questions for Mary on this?
Just, Mary, do you know why they extended the time frames out so long for 10 years? Do you have any idea?
Well, a lot of it is, so the creation of affordable housing, particularly if you're talking about development of new properties, it's a very long process. I mean, just a typical project that we do from the, well, I'll give you an example. So the Naperville Elderly Homes, the large rehab and new construction, they had their official ribbon cutting about a week ago. The very first time I sat down with Dave Weeks to talk conceptually about that was, I think, 7 years ago. We couldn't decide if it was 6 or 7 years ago. So it takes a very long time, and they already owned that property.
Yes.
So the layers of financing, the design, the financing, it's an extremely complicated process if you're looking for tax credits. And so I think I think particularly because of this new category with non-congregate shelters, there's all new rules around that. What is the home typical, 7 years for spending?
Yeah, but I think even that they've not enforced because so many people have a hard time with it. Because they
Yeah, so they give us a little more time than they do in the typical program.
Great. Well, that's good. I think it gives you a lot of time to really make a nice plan and think things out and come up with something. So that's great. Good.
Great. Member Solomon?
Thank you, Chair Renahan. Non-congregate shelters, is that like what PADS is proposing? Okay.
And I think that COVID has shown us that congregate shelters were not ideal, and we're not going to go back to that anytime soon. Isn't that your observation as well?
I think non-congregate shelters are absolutely the preferred, no question. They are the preferred way to provide services to people who are experiencing homelessness. I think just because of capacity concerns, I think about Hesed House in Aurora. I think there will probably always be some level of congregate sheltering, but non-congregate absolutely is the preferred. And I think specifically here in DuPage County, I think PAD's intention is to minimize the need for the congregate shelter, but I think again, capacity, overflow, those kinds of things, there will probably always be some need for some level until, unless and until you could create enough non-congregate sheltering space to meet the demand, or have enough rental assistance and other supports out there to really reduce the number of people experiencing homelessness. So
Chair Renahan and I had a meeting with Judy Caribou from 360 Youth last week, and just one of the huge concerns with homeless youth, like 18 to 24, is that they're usually homeless because of some sort of abuse or victimization, and they're afraid to go to congregate settings, will not go to congregate shelters because they're afraid to be re-victimized.
Right. Yeah, and actually the 360 Youth, and I'm later in the meeting, I'm going to be talking about the ARPA projects that we had specifically requested, and then I was intending to mention the 360 Youth program because that is, on Nick's giant spreadsheet, that's one of the ones that did come in. Dave and I both did a cursory look at this, and based on our very quick review, I think that is the kind of thing that, that HUD is looking for these kinds of funds. There's, so, you know, that's a possibility. There's projects in Glen Ellen. There's all kinds of things going, you know, it's one of those things like, how do we decide what's the highest and best use for these funds as well as the ARPA funds?
Great. Do you have any more questions, comments? All right. Thank you so much, Mary. So I will take a motion to receive and place on file this item.
So
I think we already
You already
did.
did.
Yes,
Oh,
We
we already did.
didn't vote yet.
We vote.
Okay. In that case, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right, that is received and placed on file. I understand we have no residency waivers. Chadwick, DuPage Care Center update.
I am here. Good morning, everybody. I wanted to share some information about the Fall Festival. We did a last minute modification because as I updated us on our prior meeting, we were in outbreak status. We had some cases. We had a COVID unit established. So we made the decision to modify the Fall Fest, which was unfortunate. However, we still saw a really good return. Right now, we're at about $24,000 of net. It's about 10,000 less than when we used to have the full Fall Festival. However, we did not do the garage sale, which in most years brings in about 4,000 or 5,000. So all in all, we're not far off. And we're hoping to have a garage sale either this fall or in the spring. So we had a lot of great raffles and a lot of exciting winners. We had actually winners from our county board office, quite a few winners. So that was exciting to see too. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to talk about was I talked about our outbreak status. As of yesterday, all of our units are now off quarantine. We're able to start up visitation and essential care visits again. So again, it's a cycle. Anytime a staff member or resident would test positive, we have to start a whole round of testing and go through this process. So it's been many weeks of testing every 3 to 7 days. And now we've had all negatives. So we're pretty excited about that. We hope we're past this wave. Do you have any questions for me?
Member Swarzy, Vice Chair.
And please forgive me if we've discussed this in the past, but I can't remember if we have, but what's the status with the governor's mandate for healthcare workers being vaccinated? Where do we stand with that?
So healthcare workers in our setting either need to be vaccinated or they need to participate in testing on a weekly basis. And so when our outbreak testing is occurring, we're testing every 3 to 7 days. So going forward, the non-vaccinated staff would be tested on a weekly basis.
And is that, we cover the cost of testing employees who don't get vaccinated, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And we do it on site.
Great. Anything else for Janelle? I will just bring up, a lot of people have been interested in what's going on with the, pay scale and all that. There is an ad hoc collective bargaining meeting at 1 o'clock today for anybody, county board member who's interested. It's largely executive session. So with that,
Yes,
a
a lot of work has been going into that. So we're hoping for a positive outcome. So thank you for everybody for your support.
Thank you. All right, Mary Keating, once again.
Yeah. So Chairman had asked me to review the ARPA requests, dive a little bit more deeply into what Nick talked about at finance last week, where he has the large spreadsheet showing all the various projects. Then over on the right-hand side, he had a column with things that had been appropriated. And then the next column was things that hadn't yet been appropriated, but were sort of hopeful to move forward on. So I just wanted to give a status on each of the requests from the Department of Community Services and get some feedback on one in particular, or actually all of them. Yeah. So the first one is case managers. Those positions were actually created through an acceptance and appropriation resolution a couple of weeks ago. So those are booked and moving forward. We are constantly in the hiring process here in community services. We do have a case manager who we just brought over from Whiteheap, which of course creates a Whiteheap vacancy, but she'll be working with the court system in the very short term. So we are moving forward on that, and that is, that's a done deal. That's signed, sealed, and delivered, those positions.
How many positions were there again?
There was a total of 4. There were 2 case managers, 1 housing navigator, and 1 outreach coordinator.
And what was the approval? How much money?
Well, it was, what was appropriated was 1 year's salary for all 4 positions, which was $240,000.
Thank you.
Second is the 211 timeline. So when Nick was creating that spreadsheet, I believe he spoke to every department head and sort of said, where are the things that you think you will spend within, before next spring? What's the timeline? Are these scalable? Can you do partial? So when we talk about 211, to me, it's either a go or no go. We can't do it for a year. We need to commit to it. So the total request was 1.6 million. That would carry it through for about 5 years. I got the impression at finance last week that the board is wholeheartedly, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I felt that there was tremendous support for 211, that the board was very supportive of moving that forward. So I just want to confirm that. What we will need at some point is an actual vote by the board, because we have a couple of things that we have to do. The first is we need to go to the 211 Illinois board. There's actually a oversight board for 211 for the state of Illinois. The good news is Gina Strafford Ahmed from our department is president of that board.
Oh,
So she's confident the board will approve. So each 211 provider has to be approved by the 211 board. So we need sort of an official, yes, we're doing this, so that we can go to the 211 board.
So you need an official vote at the county board level?
I think so, yeah, I think so. We have some technology improvements that we need to make, both really some integration of our phone system into the, to better connect with our database.
Member Solomon had a question here.
Maybe you can say it at the end of the things you're listing, but just a timeline sort of thing.
I'm getting there. We need to work with the telecom companies. So AT&T, all of the cell phone companies, what the way 211 works is based on where your phone is, where your landline or what cell tower you're pinging off of. When you call, it's the same as 911. When you call, it directs your call to the appropriate call center. So that's a process that we need to work with the telecom companies for. We need to enter into a contract with the Addison Dispatch Center. We've talked about them doing the overnights and weekends. So we have a proposal from them. We'll need to move forward with the contract. And then, of course, we need to hire some extra staff. We need to train the staff at the Addison Dispatch Center. All told, Gina's feeling is we're from the time we say go. Hopefully, we're at about a 4 to 6 month time frame before we could launch. She thinks worst case scenario, it's about 9 months, because as I kind of laid, if something went wrong with each of these, hopefully it would be no more than 9 months. But if everything went perfectly smoothly, we're probably
I know for like 911 on your cell phone bills, you have a surcharge. Is there any
There is
place,
not.
does anywhere in the country do that?
a surcharge on their phone, not that I'm aware of. Not that
Okay,
I'm
so
aware
the
of.
way that we would fund this in perpetuity is we would need to find budget dollars
revenue
after a
source,
year.
yeah.
After 5 years. Yeah.
Yes. What the 5 years allows us to do is really understand what is that true, what is that marginal cost increase, particularly for the overnights and weekends. We don't really know what the call demand will be and how taxing it would be on the Addison call center. They did say that they get a lot of those kinds of calls already. So But using the ARPA funds for that 5-year horizon, we would have a much better sense of, all right, this is exactly how much it's going to
We'll be able to use some of this for like the capital upfront kind of costs.
Yes.
So you, like year 6 would be probably.
Year
not
6 would be the
one-
operating costs, which would basically be the Addison call center contract.
Oh, yeah, we gotta go. Darn it.
Oh, sorry.
What is it?
Yeah,
Okay, Julie is gonna meet with me for a little bit. We're gonna have about a 2-hour meeting with staff today to go over all the ARPA requests. So I just want to let you know we'll be working on that. And then also, if we do approve this 211, we were just in Florida. And I mean, look at, like, this is right by a railroad track. So, I mean, there's really great things and we're kind of behind the ball here with Q-ball or
yeah,
whatever. So we really need to get this going and I hope that you guys will all support this, you know, get this approved.
I'm wholeheartedly on board.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm very lucky
Thank
to
you
have
very
our
much.
911 chair.
I have to go. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
I mean, can we just do a quick show of hands on who would be supporting the 211 ARPA? Okay, I think we can probably move on to the
I
next
think
one.
we've got it good. Yeah, okay.
Not
One-
just support, but fight for it.
Yeah, this is, you know, trying to galvanize behind Mary here. So what's next?
I wanted to give an update on the pads project. Member Krajewski raised an issue related to the school district. So first of all, the request is for $2 million from pads from the ARPA funds. We have also committed $3 million in CDBG funds. The total project cost is about $7 million. So we would be basically all in from county resources at about $5 million. The idea is, you know, my thought is I would like to do that in a single agreement. So the CDBG approval process takes a long time. We have a number of steps that have to go through, including a public hearing, environmental review. The State Historic Preservation Office has to sign off on any CDBG investment. So we're hopeful that we could get, and then HUD has to approve the release of funds before we can go to contract. So what we're hoping is that we would be able to bring that forward in November. But like I said, I'd like to do it as a single agreement. It would just specify 3 million as CDBG, 2 million is the other source. In terms of the school districts, the number that I've heard bandied around a couple of times is 140 kids. That's the cumulative number of kids who've been in that shelter since March of last year. There are currently somewhere around 50 kids in PADS care, many of whom are infants and toddlers are not in school age. They are not school aged. PADS has met, actually the day of finance last week, PADS was meeting with District 58, which is the superintendent from District 58, which is the elementary middle school district. They talked through their concerns. The school districts do have obligations related to services for children experiencing homelessness. They share basically the rights of a child who's experiencing homelessness are that they are eligible for immediate enrollment in the school of residency. They can also opt to continue to attend their school of origin. If they continue to attend their school of origin, the school of residency and the school of origin share the transportation costs. So PADS has had a very good meeting with the superintendent last week. April Redzik, who's their president, indicated that the superintendent was very supportive of the organization and certainly wants to talk through their concerns. They also are meeting with the high school district. I don't have a date on that.
Did they bring in the ROE, McKinney-Vento student
Yes.
advocate as well?
Yes, so I don't know if the student advocate from that district was in that meeting. I've had conversations with Heather Britton, who's the regional advocate. She's talking with Dr. Vassetti to identify any resources that we could perhaps, or that ROE could bring to the impacted school district.
All right, great, excellent.
So we're trying to minimize you can't say there will be zero impact on those schools, but they're certainly looking for as many resources as they can find. So that's the status of that one. And then I apologize, that I forgot we would lose members at 10.
Yeah, can we just really quickly just show of hands on the PADS agreement? And if you're still considering, that's fine too. But I mean, if you think you're.
Tell me exactly
supporting it.
what that $7 million does.
That's $7 million purchases.
Well, 5 for us.
Yeah, but the total,
Yeah.
that total $7 million purchases a property that's currently a hotel.
Okay. So
That
it's-
covers the acquisition, all of the legal costs, closing costs, all that kind of thing.
Just like what's being done already at the Red Roof Inn?
Yes. In fact, that's the hotel that they're purchasing.
It's the same thing.
It's the one.
That's the hotel that they're purchasing.
But that's already, isn't that already a done?
They don't own it. No, they don't own it. They've been renting rooms there
So
for a
they
year
want
and a
to
half.
own it. Gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah, they've been
So
renting.
it's not
rooms.
another hotel?
No.
No.
So it's making
Okay,
application.
okay, that's why I was
Yeah,
confused.
yeah, so
Okay,
it turns that into an interim housing center,
Gotcha.
which would be then families, prioritizing families and individuals with mobility issues,
Gotcha.
who would have gone through sort of an intake and screening process and then being housed there. It gives, there's some minor renovations, particularly so that they have space to do some case management work. But basically, that's the acquisition, minor rehab of the property. And then it gives them 130 rooms, do you know?
135.
Yeah, about 130 rooms to provide services.
And these are, I guess, questions I need answered to be able to be up 100% on board or, you know. So if a family is given a room, is there a time limit or until, I mean,
Well, they can't stay forever. I don't know specifically if there's a, 3-month or, but the family is, anyone who's staying there is expected to be actively participating in case management, working on whatever their permanent solution is. I do know that in this 18-month, there have been times where individuals, primarily not families, but individuals have been told that they can no longer stay there because they're not actively engaged in any kind of solution, because this is absolutely 100% not permanent housing. It's not intended to be a permanent residence for anyone.
thank you.
But just really quickly, a couple questions, a comment to Member Schwarzy. This kind of a setup, I mean, I've worked with PATS for over 20 years, and this kind of setup is fantastic because it does allow them to get the services, where before, when they're transient from one place to another place, they can't get the services or find out exactly what they are entitled to in terms of help.
Right.
So in that terms, in terms of the timing on this, we're not talking about November, so I'm assuming that they're gonna do the same kind of, PATS is gonna do the same kind of a thing that they did last year with the motel in terms of the rooms being available to those that are, because I mean, we're obviously not going to the same setup because COVID's still here. So I'm assuming that the rooms will still be available, but we're waiting for the purchase of.
They are still occupying that hotel. They are continuing to rent rooms there, and they actually have rooms at a couple of other hotels as well. So yes, there is no change. What basically the only change from what's happened over the last 18 months is that instead of writing a big check to the owner of the hotel every month for all the rooms that they're renting, they'll actually own that property. And they'll have more control
Saves them a
over.
lot of money and they can put that towards services.
Yeah, we've provided $1.5 million maybe for hotel rooms for PADS for the last 18 months. So we're, assuming that this model certainly isn't going away before next spring. If suddenly there were no, there was no COVID. We've already put almost as much money as they're requesting into this model.
And I think it helps to consider too, that 3 million of this is CDBG, 2 is ARPA. So when we're looking at our buffet or whatever you want to call it, it's not, we're not taking 5, we're not taking 7.5. So that's the
Right, and the 3 million in CDBG is the CDBG CV money, the CARES Act money. So this is exactly the type of use that that HUD and the federal government were envisioning for that CDBG CV money.
We'd be property tax exempt.
Would be tax exempt. Yeah, that is the one that they have spoken to the village. They do have the support, the village president, the village manager. They have received in writing that the village will not require any kind of zoning variation because it's not permanent housing. I feel that basically it's similar to a hotel stay. so they have no zoning.
What I missed? No, just- Hey, what's that? Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mary.
So-
Yeah.
I would just want to add my voice to very much being in support of this. I'm someone who grew up in affordable housing, thankfully never experienced homelessness as a child, but I got to go to District 200 schools, and I think that was game changing. And not to mention, I don't know when the last time anyone stayed in a red roof, but they're actually quite nice. And they have like outdoor doorways, so there's a whole bunch of study about having your own entrance and the dignity that gives you.
Right.
So I just think this is such a creative solution and a great use of these funds.
Right, yeah, and I think PADS is seeing more families because families are more comfortable. You know, given the choice between a church basement and sleeping in your car, families would make the difficult choice that they would stay in their car. But the choice between sleeping in your car and having a room that has a door that locks and has a private bathroom, I mean, it's a much easier decision for a family who can then really get access to, you know, kids have better access to school, they have better access to.
And they can leave their stuff somewhere, so they can
Right.
take a moment to
Yeah.
go apply for jobs. It's just,
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's clearly a better
Are we ready to do a show of hands? I mean, it's not binding. We would still have to go through many layers, but I would like to know our committee, all in favor? Show of hands.
we're asking about the pads.
Yeah.
your support for the PADS piece.
2 million of ARPA, 3 million of CED.
Well, I wanted to hear more. I just walked.
I know.
Yeah, no, I mean, hey,
I wasn't.
we had some time today. So we said, let's open this conversation versus canceling the meeting. So, do you guys all have a little bit more time for us to go on to the additional allocations?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, go ahead.
So next that we wanted to talk about was the grant fund. So you'll remember that at the finance committee meeting at the beginning of August, when I sort of laid out, I talked about the 93 million, I talked about where I saw the gaps, and that's where these various requests came from. So on that presentation, I talked about a $10 million grant fund to be administered over a 5-year period. There was also included some funding for the administration. So I think when I sat with Nick and sort of kind of identified, could things be scaled back? What would we be doing within the first year? What kind of decisions could we delay? What I said to him was, it was my belief that the board does have interest in providing assistance to the nonprofit community. But it's just a matter of how much and for how long and when. So for that reason, on the spreadsheet that Nick gave to everybody last week, you'll see $2 million in there. And so to me, that would be, you know, a sort of our first crack at assistance to the nonprofit communities. A couple of things that I feel very strongly about related to assistance to nonprofits are, I think it's vital that we focus on high impact, you know, sort of large grant amounts in very targeted areas, and not sort of many of you who've been on the board for a couple of years have known that sort of I've had a struggle with the Human Services Grant Fund and the number of agencies. It's a different philosophy to give lots of agencies a small amount of money that they use to leverage other things versus really narrowly targeting how we want to invest the funds for the most impact. It's very difficult work to do it that way. I won't minimize the difficulty of saying no to some needs and yes to others, no to some organizations and yes to others. But I feel like it's absolutely vital if we really want to change the way services are delivered or make a significant dent in a particular needs area. I think highly focused multi-year grants, I think, are crucial. For a nonprofit organization to be chasing money year after year, it's very difficult for them to hire people. It's very difficult for them to make any kind of meaningful change in people's lives. If this case manager, they get hired for a 1-year contract, well, 9 months into it, they're going to be looking for another job. So I think multi-year is crucial. Yes.
So on the spreadsheet that Nick gave us, you're saying this is listed under a $2 million item, now you're upping it to 10 million. Is that what you're saying?
No,
I just want to be clear.
it was
No.
originally 10.
It was originally 10.
It was originally 10. He said, what's the smallest amount that you would do initially if the board wants to decide to defer any further decisions on the ARPA money, what would I recommend doing sort of as a first cut? Like, or if we're gonna do, so my thought was, if we're doing something, it should be at least $2 million.
A year for 5 years, right? So what you're saying? How do you come up with the 10 million?
The 10 million was 2 million over
5
5,
years.
for a 5-year period. That's the other thing, not necessarily 2 million every year for 5 years. It could be in the first year, it could be 8 million. And then we've, you know, doled it out in 3 or 4 year grant terms. I think, but that was just sort of a easy math, if you will. 10 million would be roughly 2 million a year. So what I'm saying is, I think 2 million is the minimum amount that you would want to invest if you want to move forward with something.
What is this for?
This would be for, like I said, for very targeted, and that would be up to the board really, but the things that I would look at investing in would include food insecurity, housing stability and affordability, behavioral health and substance abuse.
So back when the CARES dollars came in, the food insecurity, the food banks, the food pantries, the board kind of just allotted the money. Is that true? Or did we go through you to allot the money? Because I know a lot of money went to food banks and food.
We managed those processes.
You managed the money.
Yeah. And actually, yes, the way that came about was, actually, I came up with here's what I think we
The
should do.
allocations.
Yeah, I
Just
thought
so
we
it
should give $1 million.
came
Yeah,
through
I said,
you.
let's give $1 million to food pantries. I think 3 million was for kind of rent and housing assistance. And another 2 million was split between behavioral health. Boy, it's a year ago now.
I know, it's hard to
There was a-
remember.
There was a PPE one too.
Yeah, we helped with,
that's right.
we helped the nonprofits, right, with IT equipment, PPE, the kinds of things, you know, additional cleaning, those very specific kind of one-time expenses. All those funds are now spent, and so we're, this would be sort of the next wave of assistance.
Vice Chair Shorzy?
So, so what is our history giving assistance to nonprofits now? And please explain a little bit of the difference on how you'd like to see it proceed. You've already explained it a little bit. I guess I need a little more concrete examples.
So the county has started providing the Human Services Grant Fund in 1998, I think. It was about $300,000, and over the years, the county committed to $1 million grant fund for a good period of time. There was, for a few years where due to budget constraints, it was down to 500,000, but then it had been $1 million for some time. When the pandemic came and there was tremendous concern about the county's budget, what we did was the Human Services Grant Fund was not included in the 2021 budget, but instead we had all this CARES Act money. So we still gave millions to, we gave even more, we gave millions to nonprofits. It was just through a different pot of money. So we have a long history of providing assistance to nonprofits. The Human Services Grant Fund was, the philosophy was very different than what I'm advocating with these funds. It was, let's have sort of a, really, if you will, a minimum criteria. We will, you know, let's have some objective measures about how well they completed their application, what are their outcome measures, what's the capacity, what's their history. So not everybody got the same amount, but there were a lot of agencies that received a very small grant amount.
Like $3,000.
3,000. There were
Like paper.
So any nonprofit can apply.
Mary, if I may,
Yeah.
I apologize, but you may want to address the fact that the categories that you're looking at were very similar to the categories that were addressed in the Human Service Grant Fund.
Yeah, we did have, yeah, there was a little bit more, a little bit broader, but these were the type, those were the types of things, you know, behavioral health, substance abuse, housing stability, food insecurity, with the ESL classes, immigrant services, trying to think of some of the others. Services for individuals with disabilities, services for seniors,
Domestic violence.
Domestic violence, right, yeah, all of those various topics, right. So it was a broad swath of categories and a large pool of nonprofit organizations, which is fine. But I think I'm a big advocate for using these dollars to make a significant programmatic impact. And that's what I'm advocating for with these ARPA funds. It's a very different philosophy. I would hesitate to put a value judgment on either one. I think it's a philosophical difference. I'm just telling you what my personal philosophical thoughts are. So,
Member Solomon had a question, comment.
I would very much agree with you that that's the trend in philanthropy is larger impact gifts. And I think what the real advantage of the $10 million 5-year plan is that it gives grantees the ability to plan for 5 years, whereas, you know, they might have known every year there's $1 million and maybe they'd be eligible, but that only gets you through the next year. So if you wanted to do like food banking, you wanted some like a delivery, like, you know, people get CSAs delivered to their house. Some food pantries do that with your deliveries, but there's a lot of infrastructure. So are you going to do that with a 1-year grant? Probably not. But 3-year grant, maybe we buy a van and we figure out the app, that kind of stuff.
well, I
So
think of,
it's
you
a
know,
really brilliant idea.
I think of our family self-sufficiency program. It's a 5-year case management program. So clients know going into it, if I follow my plan, I can be involved in this for 5 years. And, you know, hopefully you'll be able to work with the same case manager for that period of time, but, you know, so it makes a difference in the quality, I think, of the services that are provided. It's, you know, sort of longitudinal services that you can do, you know, a 3-year, 4-year grant makes a big difference to an organization in terms of their ability to plan.
And this is what we've talked about with CDC, is trending towards these larger grants, multiple years, which really helps with staffing in terms of the workload, the overwhelm. This lets you focus on much bigger projects, correct? This is, you know, makes the whole process much more streamlined and efficient and effective.
Right, yeah, it's as much work, it's the same amount of work to manage typically a $5,000 grant as it is a $50,000 grant. If you're talking about reviewing an application, looking at, you know, quarterly reports or annual reports, that processing, it doesn't vary with the size of the dollar amount. What it does is just creates additional administrative costs. Exactly.
Would this plan, from my ignorance, would this plan put smaller nonprofits out of business?
No. My feeling is if a nonprofit is going to go out of business because they didn't get $3,000 from us, it's probably, you know, we're talking about federal money here. We're talking about, you know, what we're saying is this organization and this cause is so important that these federal resources should be behind it. And so
it doesn't matter the size of the nonprofit if it's dealing with hunger. Is that correct or no?
I think the objective here, and I think that we're probably going to cut our conversation, we've been at it for a while, we've had our next meetings, but is to find the unmet needs and then kind of determine what is high impact. And, you know, we're not there in terms of the how. This is just laying out are we all in agreement that we want to give to nonprofits? So we can just take that bite.
I can sit down with you later. And
yeah,
try, but
we're
I
gonna
should have done that. already.
I think we are sitting down at 10:30.
Yeah. But anyway, are we all on the same page in terms of we want to give to nonprofits and $2 million, if that's is what we think we can do, that we're going to support this when it all comes to finance?
I would push to really start with the 10 million, because I think if we just do the 2 million, we're pushing the progress to year 2 or 3 where we could start projects now. So I think in terms of impact, I would be supportive of starting at 10 and making the board vote. What goes down, let's start at 10 now.
No, I appreciate that. I think I think this is a high priority. I think probably for most people on the board, this would be a high priority. And then the next fight is how we do it. And Mary's got some thoughts, but I think we're going to save those for today. And any last comments?
No, thank you for your feedback on all of this.
And so was that everybody raising their hand? Let's see it. Yeah. All right, thanks everyone. All right, thanks, Barry. All right, and then do we have new business? Any other old business? Old business, new business? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So, second.
All right, thank you all very much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.